Bonsoir. Le Canadiens de Montreal are proud to select David
We planned it that way. David Reinbacher.
That was the announcement, quote-unquote announcement at last night's NHL Draft. Carey Price making the quote-unquote announcement for the Montreal Canadiens. Forgetting the name, man, I felt so bad for him, just blanking on the name there. And I just imagine the moment where he says David, and then everyone in the arena whose first name is David is thinking, oh, is it me? Is it me? Let's talk about last night's draft for the Montreal Canadiens, and let's also talk about last night's draft for the province of Quebec, because some people are pointing out that there was not a Quebecois player to be seen on that stage last night. The wonderful Stu Cowan from the Montreal Gazette joins us now on the line. Hi, Stu.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing great, and it's great to catch up with you on this one. First things first, let's talk about the Canadiens' decision last night. I've forgotten his name, so please refresh. Like Carey Price, I've forgotten the guy's name.
David Reinbacher. Wow, whatever happens with David Reinbacher, whether he works out and becomes a great first-round pick or he becomes a bust, that Carey Price video will be played for years on bloopers and at every draft coming forward.
I know, and
it's just sort of a David, and then you can see him sort of wandering, and Kent Hughes stepped in and said they planned it that way, but they really didn't. Carey Price apologized later on his Twitter account, and Kent Hughes said it was the case he just sort of blanked out for a second, which can happen to all of us at moments, but it's that will definitely be remembered. A little bit of a surprise for me. Even David Reinbacher himself said he was surprised he was picked so high, and Carey Price was surprised, I guess, also. Matvei Michkov, the Russian player, big offensive talent, who was still available at number 5, a bit of a risk pick because he has 3 more years left on his contract in the KHL, and also with everything that's going on in Russia these days. Philadelphia decided to take him at number 7. He's a player I think really could have helped the Canadiens moving forward. This is a team that has struggled offensively. They haven't had a player finish in the top 10 in NHL scoring since Matt Snaslin back in 1986, which is a long time ago. But Ken Hughes said that they believe this defenseman is the player who can help them most in the future. Big kid, good in the defensive zone, good skater, they're saying, good pass. But like with all draft picks, time will tell. But when they made the pick, I thought back to when they picked Jesperi Kotkaniemi there a few years ago, and the video camera went to the woman in the stands holding her hands up to her face like, oh my God. And I'm sure a lot of Canadiens fans watching the draft last night had a similar reaction.
Stu, for our listeners here, the state that the Canadiens are in, and is it officially a rebuild? I don't know what they've decided to determine on calling whatever phase they're in right now. Just tell our listeners, how important are these drafts for the state of the franchise?
Well, I had a one-on-one with Jeff Molson a few months ago, and he used the word rebuild, and that's exactly what this is. And the thing is, what I like about this team with Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes and Marty St. Louis, they're all on the same page. They're all smart guys. They have a vision. They have a plan for what they want to do moving forward, and they're sticking with it. And last night was another example of that. They know what they want to do. They're confident in what they want to do, and it's either going to work or it's not going to work. And if it doesn't work, they'll be out of jobs. And if it does work, they'll be happy. Canadiens fans will be happy. But at least there's a plan in place now, whereas with Marc Bergevin previously, it just seemed to be plugging a hole here, plugging a hole there. You look at the trade for Pierre-Luc Dubois and what the LA Kings were willing to give up for him. Ken Hughes wasn't willing to give up that much. I think that was a smart decision with where they are in this rebuild. So, last season was the first full year of the rebuild. Normally a rebuild takes 4 or 5 years. So Ken Hughes isn't rushing into anything. And this is another example of not rushing into it with David Reinbacher. But again, for Michkov, it's a risky pick. But sometimes you need to take a risk. And for a guy with that much offensive talent on a team that has been struggling offensively for so many years, I think it might have been worth the risk.
So let me ask you this: for the upcoming season, are the Canadiens going to still be in the mode? Let the young guys play. If we lose, so what? We'll get more draft picks at a better draft picks. That's where we're at? We should be expecting another year like that.
Similar. I mean, Ken Hughes said at the end of the season that they'd like to make the playoffs next season. That's something he didn't say the year before. That they weren't even thinking about that. It was all about development. Going into this year, You want to take a step forward. Obviously, they took a step forward last season in the standings, even though they finished fifth to last. They still improved a lot from the previous year. But Marty St. Louis is going to let the young guys make mistakes, let them learn from their mistakes. As I said, it's usually a 5-year plan for a rebuild. But as it continues, the mistakes will be less forgivable. Right now, they just want the players to go out, play, have fun. If they make mistakes, learn from them. They don't want players obviously making the same mistakes over and over again. But I think one of the problems with the Canadiens' development of players in the past is that their young players played terrified to make any mistakes. If you made a mistake, you either sat on the bench or you sat down in the AHL, or you were rid of. And I think that really hurt the development of a lot of their young players. And you look at the impact that Marty St. Louis has had on Cole Caulfield since he took over, on Kirby Dach since he took over. That's what they're hoping can happen with more players moving forward, just allowing them to play, giving them the freedom to make mistakes and then learn from them. So they're still in that process going into next season. But every season moving forward, the mistakes will be a little bit less forgivable. But they've made the Canadiens fun to watch last season. They didn't play scared. They played trying to make plays, trying to create offense, and I think we're going to see more of that next season.
And that is excitement for people in the building when you've got a team playing like that. We are with Stu Cowan from the Montreal Gazette talking about the Canadiens draft. And now, more important, let's move along, Stu, and talk about the Quebec aspect of this. It was just over a year ago that the Premier of Quebec, François Legault, made hockey a very political thing, right, with announcing a strategy to boost the number of Quebec players in the NHL. And I think last night sort of put on display why a lot of people think this is a critical issue right now. You couldn't find Quebec players being drafted, players from Quebec being drafted during that first round. I know there are a couple expected to be drafted in round 2. So, Stu, what's your take on that? I mean, hockey is a part of Quebec culture, and it seems harder and harder for Quebec players to make it into the NHL.
Well, 6 players from the Western Hockey League, drafted last night, and 7 players who played in the U.S. And the American route is becoming every year much more of a better option, I think, for young kids, and even as a parent, whether you want to send your kids to play junior hockey and ride the buses and not really be able to get schoolwork done and all those kind of things, or go to the U.S. Where you play less games, you have more time to work out in the gym, you have more things in your life than just hockey, you develop on and off the ice. But having said that, the WHL still had 6 guys drafted in the first round, but it's an ongoing issue with Quebec players and Hockey Quebec, and they're looking into it, trying to find ways to improve it. You go back to Alexis Lafreniere, who was the number 1 pick a few years ago by the New York Rangers, coming out of the Quebec League, and he struggled in the NHL. He's become like a 3rd or 4th line guy, and he was expected a lot more out of that. And how much of that was him playing in what's considered a weaker Quebec League inflated his status. So it's a problem that's been going on for a while. The Canadiens have said they'd like to have more French local players on the team, but there's just not that many out there. That's one of the reasons that they were trying to get Pierre-Luc Dubois in that trade. The price ended up being too high, but for whatever reasons, a lot of reasons, I think in Quebec, I think they start minor hockey a little too early. And I remember when my son was 5 and he started, they were on the ice before kindergarten started. So it's still summer, so kids that had been playing baseball had to leave baseball to go to hockey. I think there's a number of issues, but it's not going to be easy to fix. And once you get that sort of stereotype from scouts, et cetera, that the Quebec League isn't as strong and the Quebec players maybe aren't as good, it's hard to shed that. So there's a lot of work ahead for Hockey Quebec to try and get more Quebec players selected in the higher rounds of the draft.
Yeah, and Stu, I saw that Mark Denny, who's the guy that's been picked by the Quebec government to lead this committee looking at hockey in the province, he's disappointed with the lack of action so far. So, and as these things go, right, like you make it, let's say you do something, you make a decision today, it's going to be years and years and years before you see results showing up in the QMJHL and the NHL.
Exactly. And what the U.S. has done with this National Development Team program, they take the best players from across the country and they form one team with them. I mean, that's where Cole Caulfield went through, Austin Matthews, a lot of guys in the NHL now, and that's a great way to develop talent. And it would be interesting for Quebec to do something similar to that, but that won't happen because of the junior teams who need to have players and need to be fed players, and that's where the NHL gets so many of their players developed from. But again, the U.S. route has just become, to me, a much better option for young players, whether they're going to make it to the NHL or not. I think it's just a better experience overall playing U.S. college hockey than what you get from playing junior hockey.
Stu Cowan is sports columnist at the Montreal Gazette. Please go read his writing today on the Montreal Gazette website on the draft and more. Thanks so much, Stu. Be well.
Yeah, my pleasure.